Z takového stánku něco přivezu Metlovi jako suvenýr. Já jsem se chtěl ještě podívat na to video. Londýn stojí za hovno a proč je dneska z něj dirty money laundry?
Concrete upon Thames, the big grey. Nearly 9 million people live here, many of them spending half their paycheck to live in a rat-filled bedsit above a Tesco, just to call themselves a Londoner. A mostly subterranean species of British person that only cares about money or status.
Ty píčo, plakát na bohové Egypta, nejlepší film roku, to byl masterpiece. Si pamatuju, jak jsme na to byli v kině, ty kokot, jsme chodili se včerem každý víkend do kina, to byly skvělý, bezstarostný časy, ježiš, to bylo tak porádní.
And hates anyone with more money or status than them. The puckering center of this anus town is backed up.
Proč kurva na mostě sedí cápek s deštníkem, že subway je 150 metrů odsud?
Up with snail-paced tourists, illustrious landmarks and chain restaurants that sell steak made of shoe leather. You'll get some better food and breathable air down south of the river, but you'll also be jostling for space with ketamine-snorting students who are protesting the gentrification of the neighbourhoods that they're currently gentrifying. To the north, you'll find art industry snobs living in million-pound townhouses, living 4 doors down from drill rappers who are bragging about the murders, what they done last Tuesday. The east is stuffed with bankers, Eurotrash wankers, and Cockney cab drivers who consider themselves the last real Londoners, even though they all live in Essex. The west is the only part of the city that...
Viděl jsem právě na tom autu.
The west drivers who consider themselves the
Viděl jsem právě na
last real
tom tagu
Londoners.
reklamu na Lvýho krále v kině, teda v divadle, protože na toho přesně jdeme.
Even though they all live in Essex. The west is the only part of the city that isn't crammed with cretins, and that's because it's empty. Filled with
Ardis přišel zpátky a vidí prostě footage Londýna. Ardis by byl v pekle v moment, kdyby se dostal do kapitalistického Londýna. Musel tam žít. A ještě k tomu by tam všichni poslouchali metal covery. To by bylo jeho osobní peklo. Na toho jdete, asi nejlepší muzikál, co jsem viděl, ten je top. Jo, Denisa už ho viděla, takže to, jsem se jí ptal, jestli to chce vidět znova, takže to.
Mansions of Russian oligarchs,
Slunný den v Londýně, Capek nebo vybrat víc fake fotostock.
These are the people who really own London, and this is the story of how they ruined it.
Miláčku, jdeme na Tool koncert. Jesus fucking Christ, dobře, ale v Londýně jdeme na Lvýho krále. No, takhle nějak to probíhalo, ta konverzace. Lásko, poletíš se mnou do cizí země na kapelu, která má 13-minutový songy? Dobře, ale jako chci do zoo a na Lvýho krále. Já říkám, jo, tak ty vole, to beru, to zní dobře.
1950s London was like a different planet. The streets were occasionally clean, heads were mostly hatted, and the river was filled with all the stuff that the city was pilfering from the rest of the planet.
Fuj.
The British pound reigned supreme as the world's reserve currency.
Temže ty vole v minulém století a před minulým a před minulým.
And losing the empire that made it rich in the first place. India broke free of British control in 1947, starting a chain reaction of other countries deciding they didn't want a jewelry-topped 25-year-old as their god-queen ruler either. This was all very bad news for London, as it couldn't really afford any more wars, but it also couldn't afford to lose control of all the resources that it had acquired by gunpoint. After this, the only thing that was sustaining London as a financial powerhouse was its control over the world's largest trade funnel, the Suez Canal. While Egypt owned the land either side of it, Britain was the canal's largest shareholder, allowing London to take a tasty cut from every trading vessel that used it.
Takový krásný lodní spojení a stejně nepřitáhnou žádný skurvený koření.
A new Middle East crisis arises as President Nasser of Egypt tells a wildly cheering crowd in Alexandria that Egypt has seized the internationally owned Suez Canal. The 85-year-old waterway, of which the United States is the second biggest user, brings a 3-power meeting in London to discuss the biggest threat this year has posed to world peace.
When Egypt nationalized the canal in 1956, Britain re-invaded this strategically important nation, killing thousands of civilians in the process. The international community, but mostly America, finger-tutted Britain with the threat of sanctions, sending the already faltering pound to the edge of collapse. Britain had no choice but to heroically retreat from Egypt. being replaced by
Čule,
the
hroutící
first
se
ever
Libra,
UN
skvělý, no.
peacekeeping operation, which was something that British propaganda
To se drží na
actually
30, nebo
thought
lehce
was
po
worth
30 jsem
bragging
kupoval ve
As they
směnárně.
sail from port side, many will be asking the question.
To byl Putin?
Will be asking the question. If they had not gone there in the first place, would the United Nations Emergency Force ever have come into being?
After Suez, London was pretty much broke. All that had to remember the glory days of empire were the many treasures and priceless artifacts that it keeps in the British Museum. Still retained today under the internationally recognised principle of finders keepers, losers weepers. The British Empire itself was reduced to a few mosquito-ridden, resource-free rocks in the middle of the world's oceans. And we'll get back to them, but first I need to explain something about the City of London.
OK, dobré, máme tady něco trošičku víc současného. Co se děje teď?
For nearly 10% of the entire country's economic output.
Ty píčo, tak odsuďkou. Tady z takového stánku něco přivezu Metlovi jako suvenýr. Tady prodávají ty nejvíc autentické věci z Londýna pro turisty.
I should say, I don't want to pay tax. Nobody enjoys it. What annoys me is that these people think they're exempt from it. And what annoys me even more is that it's ordinary people who end up footing the bill. Energy bills in the UK are spiralling. The cost of living generally is going fucking bananas. I mean, there's no other way to say it. Even the usually optimistic and empowering Martin Lewis is just one bell and placard away from declaring the end to be nigh.
We're going to have about 10 million people in fuel poverty. We have a real absolute, not relative poverty issue going to come in the UK. As the money-saving expert who's been known for this, I am virtually out of tools to help people now.
Britain's ruling class is happy to let its foreign visitors get away with not paying tax because the money that they're saving is ending up in...
Co ti jebe, tam cizinci neplatí daně v Londýně? Bruch. A tady borci normálně mají záchvat, když někdo jde do pražský zoo zadáčo a je z Ukrajiny. Ty kokot.
...in their back pocket / Bermuda-based holding company. Margaret Thatcher actually lived here until she croaked, although she never technically owned it, apparently happy not to pay tax to the country that she ran into the ground.
Tax loopholes na domech. Výborně, takže nemovitosti jsou v píči, protože tady doslova jsou díry v daňovém zákonu. A fungují hlavně pro bohatý. Well, aby mohli koupit další baráky a pronajímat je zoufalým Londýňanům. Klasika, no.
We see another former Prime Minister acquiring West London property by purchasing a tax haven shell company from the Bahrainian Minister for Industry. I guess it's nice to see Tony contributing something to the Middle East besides a body count. We also see Viktor Fedotov, a Russian oil magnate accused of a $4 billion fraud scheme in Russia. He owns property here too, but he also secretly owned a UK energy firm which he used to donate
Ty vole, těch nemovitostí v Londýně, který mají koupený ruský oligarchové, těch je jako fakt hodně, to se řešilo dost.
After COVID, even the government is feeling the pinch. So the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rishi Sunak, has come to all of us taxpayers with his porridge bowl outstretched, asking for some more. He has just enacted a substantial rise in the national insurance rate.
No už nemají, no jasně, a teď je otázka, jestli když je zabavili, tak je ty vole teď jako rozdají potřebným, nebo je prostě jednoduše dají do aukce a koupí to někdo, kdo tam má ještě daňovou výhodu, jakožto multimilionář skupující prostě nemovitosti. Ajajaj.
Rishi's wife received £10 million last year because of stock she owns in her dad's company, but didn't pay a single pound of British tax by declaring her permanent residence to be elsewhere, even though...
LOL. $10 milionů nemusíš zdanit, protože si dáš, že vlastně bydlíš jinde. To mě poser, ty vole. To je, kdybych já si nahlásil, že jsem prostě na Maltě, protože bych tam měl dceřinou společnost. A nemusel bych danit ani píčku a dál bych žil v České republice. Ty kokot. To za poslední 4 roky bych ušetřil miliony.
To be elsewhere, even though when she lives here, she lives next door to the fucking Prime Minister. Meanwhile, this national insurance hike will hit ordinary Londoners the hardest for daring to live in a city where most of the opportunities still are and where wages are only higher because the rent is so high. We lose about £15 billion to tax fraud every year, and much of it is being squirreled away in London's own secrecy jurisdictions. Tax doesn't mean anything to these people. It's something the little people need and the middle people pay. Hello, regular Ordinary Things viewers. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it.
Tak to je kurva úplně všude stejný. Offshore companies. No jistě. No, Londýn, taková zatracená díra. Stejně tam všichni chtějí žít a proto to tam bude stát tolik i nadále, i kdyby se stalo kurva cokoliv. To je jak Praha. No.
Má světelný meč.
Počkej, ty si tež chatička.
To jsem neřekla já.
Mě nevypadly ryby z toho. Hej, neutočte, kde jste? Vy blázni.
Co mi?
Tady je týpek.
Ty se nesměj.
Pojďte, tady jsou šily.
To se nesmí smát.